We continue the Varieties of Religious Experience, a study in human nature by William James. Continuing lecture 8, The Divided Self and the process of its unification. My peace would be in and out 20 times a day. Comfort now and trouble presently. Peace now, and before I could go a furlong, as full of guilt and fear as ever heart could hold. When a good text comes home to him, this he writes, "Give me good encouragement for the space of 2 or 3 hours. This was a good day to me. I hope I shall not forget it. The glory of these words was then so weighty on me that I was ready to swoon as I sat, yet not with grief and trouble, but with solid joy and peace. This made a strange seizure on my spirit. It brought light with it, and commanded a silence in my heart of all those tumultuous thoughts that before did use, like masterless hellhounds, to roar and bellow, and make a hideous noise within me. It showed me that Jesus Christ had not quite forsaken and cast off my soul." Well, people are going to attribute everything that happens, more or less, or anything that happens, to whatever they're deciding to worship, whether it has an involvement or not. Such periods accumulate until he can write, "And now remained only the hinder part of the tempest, for the thunder was gone beyond me. Only some drops would still remain, that now and then would fall upon me. And at last, now did my chains fall off my legs indeed. I was loosed from my afflictions and irons. My temptations also fled away, so that from that time those dreadful scriptures of God left off to trouble me. Now went I also home rejoicing, for the grace and love of God. Now could I see myself in heaven and earth at once. In heaven, by my Christ, by my head, by my righteousness and life, though on earth, by my body or person. Christ was a precious Christ to my soul that night. I could scarce lie in my bed for joy and peace and triumph through Christ." Interestingly enough, Christ, according to the Bible, isn't the only Messiah. Christ, Jesus Christ isn't the only one given that distinction. Bunyan became a minister of the gospel, and in spite of his neurotic constitution, and of the 12 years he lay in prison for his nonconformity, his life was turned to active use. He was a peacemaker and doer of good, and the immortal allegory which he wrote has brought the very spirit of religious patience home to English hearts. But neither Bunyan nor Tolstoy could become what we have called healthy-minded. They had drunk too deeply of the cup of bitterness ever to forget its taste, and their redemption is into a universe 2 stories deep. Each of them realized a good which broke the effective edge of his sadness, yet the sadness was preserved as a minor ingredient in the heart of the faith by which it was overcome. The fact of interest for us is that, as a matter of fact, they could and did find something welling up in the inner reaches of their consciousness, by which such extreme sadness could be overcome. Tolstoy does well to talk of it as that by which men live, for that is exactly what it is, a stimulus, an excitement, a faith, a force that reinfuses the positive willingness to live, even in full presence of the evil perceptions that erewhile made life seem unbearable. For Tolstoy's perceptions of evil appear within their sphere to have remained unmodified. His latter works show him implacable to the whole system of official values, the ignobility of fashionable life, the infamies of empire, the spuriousness of the church, the vain conceit of the professions, the meanness and cruelties that go with great success. Well, do they have to, though? And every other pompous crime and lying institution of this world, to all patients with such things, his experience has been for him a permanent ministry of death. Bunyan also leaves this world to the enemy. And the following quotation from Bunyan, he's omitted certain intervening portions of the text, and like the last time, well, what's best, what's good, what's true isn't always the easiest, at least not at that time. And if it's actually the scripture of God, it's that, oh, well, I'm going to have to do something different. I'm going to have to be nonconformist. I'm going to have to be this, that, or the other. I'm going to have to go to an effort. Even if in the long run I already know it's not going to be as good for me, but, you know. But, yeah, it can, you know, difficulty can strengthen us and enlighten us and give us long-term pleasure. I must first pass a sentence of death, he says, upon everything that can properly be called a thing of this life, even to reckon myself, my wife, my children, my health, my enjoyments, and all as dead to me, and myself as dead to them, to trust in God through Christ as touching the world to come, as touching this world, to count the grave my house, to make my bed in darkness, and to say to corruption, Thou art my father, and to the worm, Thou art my mother and sister. The parting with my wife and my poor children hath often been to me as the pulling of my flesh from my bones, especially my poor child, who lay nearer my heart than all I had besides. Poor child, thought I, what sorrow art thou like to have for thy portion in this world? Thou must be beaten, must beg, suffer hunger, cold, nakedness, and 1,000 calamities, though I cannot now endure that wind should blow upon thee. But yet must I venture you all with God, though it goeth to the quick to leave you. The hue of resolution is there, but the full flood of ecstatic liberation seems never to have poured over poor John Bunyan's soul. These examples may suffice to acquaint us in a general way with the phenomenon technically called conversion. In the next lecture, I shall invite you to study its peculiarities and concomitants in some detail.